Oh, that's new. What comes up on the Zoom? It's like you can release your video order here. Is that you, Raj? Is that Zoom?
I have no idea. Zoom changes like every other day.
There's literally a message pop up saying you can release your video order here. No idea what that means, but anyway, we are live on Facebook. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to everyone who's listening. Today was a really fascinating topic, wasn't it? How are you a leader? Was the name of the topic. And I think it was purposely poised. How are you a leader? Because leadership normally has a connotation with the corporate world, right? And in terms of whether you're a leader by title, whether you're a leader as a CEO, a president, a director. And what was really impactful is how we unpacked throughout the conversation with the men on the private Zoom that actually leadership is boundless by title, if you dig deep enough, and it's more down to the impact that you actually create for people around you. And the difference between obviously that age-old debate about what's a leader and what's a manager, and what's the transition when you become, well, what's the transition of you becoming a leader. And I think also leadership in all walks of life, guys, right? So you can be a leader in your marriage, you can be a leader as a parent, you can be a leader in your business, and you can be a leader as you can even be an employee and still be a leader, right? It's the impact that you're creating on people around you. So there was so much to it. I mean, I've got quite a lot of notes there. I'm sure you guys have got loads of notes. I've got like half A5 page worth of notes there. But and then you've got the different, obviously, leadership styles, which we're not going to bore you to death and go into, because I think everyone can read that and Google that. But I think it was fascinating to know the differences of the different leadership. And I think the main fundamental reason why we started this conversation is that leadership is something different to each individual. And there were a couple of different interesting conversations where some people, I think, Raj, you asked the question, right? About whether leadership is taught. I can't remember the exact frame of the question. I don't know if you've got it, but I don't know if you remember it, but it was something,
Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah, so the question was how we asked the group, how many of you have learned or were taught how to become a leader? And the question was structured in that in sense to just kind of reflect on that, because it's one of these like cool words, right? Leadership, management, boss, coach, etc. But do we really understand what the word actually means and how we've learned through experience or picked up certain traits on what is leadership and how do we show up as a leader, and where do we get these concepts from?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I mean, you know, I think a lot of the guys had different stories as usual to share, right? Which is always fascinating. And then we always get some unique personal shares, and then we always learn a little bit something different about the men that we have in our Zoom calls, which is always amazing, right? Because we're just one massive community, and we all love showing up. And I think everyone commented saying we don't know where the time goes. And 2 weeks ago we were talking, and it's another 2 weeks. But I think there's elements of leadership in that, right? Because it's having the right intention and creating the right impact on people around you, and having the willingness to understand where you have done things wrong and where you need to actually learn from. And I think leadership, the word leadership is organic, right? In its foundation, because you're constantly growing in different ways. And I guess if you were to use an analogy of a tree, you can have different branches of leadership, right? That you have, but bows under your, on your string. And it's not something I feel. I'm happy to hear some comments from people and you guys that I don't feel that you're born with it. I think it's something that you have to be lived. Like you have to experience certain life experiences to then have, I guess, the lessons learned, both good or bad, to take away from that that you actually can then share that knowledge with others in the same situation, that you then have an authority because you've experienced it, and then you can impart that knowledge on. I don't know, everyone might have a different thought process, but I think for me, it's something that has to be experienced.
I think the key distinction there is that leadership requires a very flexible approach based on the situation and how we show up, react, or take control, and knowing the difference between when we need to step back and when we need to lead. Whereas management's more about a consistent daily approach to build an authority, whereas we talk about leadership as being more of an influence on people, to a collective bigger goal. So yeah. The role of the manager is almost boxed into a function, whereas leadership is just much more broader in any context.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think if we go back to when our Zoom session, you know, it was, I think half of the Zoom session was, how do you define a leader, right? Because until you don't know, and is there a right or wrong? Well, we don't know. And I think when we were on that call, it was so funny because, you know, there were some people on the call where they defined a leader in some way or whatever. And then when we talked about, you know, I think Manoj, you brought it up, was, you know, Viraj, was our leader supposed to be liked, which then brought up a whole new conversation. But yeah, what is a leader to you? And, you know, I think we touched on, which was very deep in terms of when we did that call, was it's not just about being liked, but are you, if you've got that whole concept of leaders are not supposed to be liked, are you conditioning your mind so much that actually you're forgetting that balance of who you really are, and becoming arrogant when actually you don't need to be arrogant to be a leader? But then if you're conditioning your mind constantly with that leaders are not supposed to be liked, then how do you know, and when do you know whether you're becoming a person that you're not? And I've done it in my own thing. And I think I still do it when I'm actually on an event. And if people are working for me, and if that's family members who are helping me out, I realize that because I'm leading that event, I don't realize sometimes that the people I'm speaking to and saying, go and get that done, hurry up, do this, hurry up. Actually, they're my family. But because my mind is, I'm a leader at this thing and you don't know any better, and what I say goes because I know this industry, then I realize once I've done that, which is too late then, I realize actually I shouldn't have spoken like that. I could have directed it in a different way, but I still do it. It's so weird, but even though I know and I'm telling you what I think a leader shouldn't be arrogant, I actually do it myself. And it just made me realize after that Zoom call.
I think it's a great example, Sagar, because what you're describing is, I mean, the textbook definition of situational leadership. And then if you dig a bit deeper, what one of the guys in the group mentioned is being a commanding leader, right? So commanding doesn't necessarily mean it's associated with, you know, being a dictator, like, or my way or the highway kind of thing. Commanding just means taking control in a situation that warrants somebody to take that control. Like the analogy that I gave is, what if all three of us are firefighters, right? But if the fire, the flames were, you know, the accelerants were going in a certain direction, and if one of us didn't take control of that situation, in that situation, it would cost our lives. But I think, and the example that you gave, I think you can be commanding, but you can be commanding and have compassion. So you can still be commanding, but you can be commanding with compassion, which means it's not necessarily what you say, it's the way you say it. So you can still say to me, Manoj, get that mic from here. Or you can say, Manoj, can you get that mic from it? There's a subtle difference. You see, still commanding, but it's I think it's fascinating, right? Because it's all relevant to the situation that you're in and the experience you're in. And I don't know about you guys, but I always get fascinated when people have this debate about what your style is. Like, the style depends on the situation and the people in the situation. It's not like I can read a book and say, I'm adopting this style, right? For me, it doesn't work that way. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you guys think.
No, and there's a comment from Prina in the chat with the example that Saga gave, is that in this instance, are you a leader or you're a manager? And it sounds like you're more managing a process versus that as well. And it's one that we just tend to collapse more often. And to manage your question there, I think management requires a consistent style so that it doesn't confuse people, whereas leadership is very fluid based on the individual and the situation and the person. Like, let's say, for example, one that came for me in the chat was, if we look at our home environment, right? We've got a house with kids and it's messy and all that kind of stuff. Now, we discuss various different leadership styles. So if I were to adopt a visionary style, I'd be like, okay, here's what a nice clean house would look like for us. This is the space it's going to give us. You know, it's more of a collective thing. But when it comes to getting a bunch of toddlers to clean the house, it does require a little bit more command, or even setting the pace to get that movement going, so that once we're there, we can appreciate it for what it has. Otherwise, if we just kind of step back and say, can we do this? Can we do that? Softly, it may not necessarily work. So it's being able in the short term to set the pace or begin to command, but then also allow the process to pan out, and then know when to switch gears as well, so that it doesn't become dictatorial.
We also talked about the traits, right? Which is quite crucial and fundamental and foundational of any great leader. You know, doesn't make a difference whether it's female or male, right? And I think some of the traits, and I think empathic leader came to mind, empowerment came to mind. I think the word trust came to mind, because you have to, there were so many of these words, right? And I think, sorry, you were saying, I didn't catch the word.
No, I was just saying integrity as well.
Oh yeah, massive one. Yeah, like you know, and authenticity. Like I think everybody who associates themselves with looking up to someone in a leadership role probably has a mixture of those different traits, right? And I think, see, the fascinating thing is, people normally have a connotation with leadership in corporate world, but actually every single, so that we purposely poised that topic like that because we all feel here that everyone in their life is a leader at some point or the other, right? Whether they realize it or not. So you could be a parent and be a leader to your children, right? And you can be a role model and be a leader. You can be a entrepreneur and be a leader. You can be a coach and be a leader. You can be a teacher, right? And be a leader. Like, you can go on and on and on. So actually, if we unbox and take the word leadership out of whatever box our subconscious and conscious minds have put it in, we're all leaders in our own right. I just think, and if you break it down in its simplest form, leadership is something that has responsibility, right, with a view to impact others. So how are we doing it is a choice, and it's a personal choice. You could be seen as a bad leader and a good leader, but that's more down to the way you're doing it, right, as opposed to, just what I mean. It's such a fascinating subject, I think. Yeah.
And I think one of the other things that just came out, just reading some of the messages on our Zoom thing, and some people, I think they are leaders, but do they fulfill that leadership? Or do they turn away and take a step back from being that leader because of the responsibilities that come with that job or with that title? As we said, it's that title, right, of a leader. And I think someone brought that up, is they know that they were supposed to be leading something, and one of the guys brought that up, that they were supposed to be leading something at the premises he was in. However, he then took a step back because he didn't want all the responsibility that comes with it, even though he could have led that and he would have been a wonderful leader. He didn't fulfill it because in the back of his mind was, actually, all these responsibilities come. Do I really want to deal with them? So yeah, I think some people know they're leaders, but they maybe just don't want to go that extra step because they don't want to come, and face all the obstacles that come with it. Because again, you may face these obstacles, and as a result, if you are a leader, you may think you're a good leader, but then are you gonna have that change of mindset and become arrogant? And that's not what you want.
Yeah.
And you don't want to portray that. So because they know they don't have that balance, actually, let me just not become a leader. Let me just deal with it the way I deal with it the best. And I don't know, it's one of this is why the whole thing, it all goes back to, how do you define leader, or what do you define as leader?
I think it's that's the first question, right, that each of us have to ask ourselves. It's like, what is our definition of leadership? And the second question, probably as a follow-on, would be, what is our definition of great leadership? Such like someone, again, male or female, that we would love to have these kind of traits that we define, because there has to be individual traits, right? Because I think the example I gave, where I suffered through corporate bullying, right? Through one of the workplaces, which obviously I won't mention because I'm on Facebook Live now, might get sued or something. but but that was the best thing that happened to me. Now you might think, man, RJ, how do you let someone bully you, right? Because you don't look like the type of guy who let you do that. But hey, certain situations you're put in, it's called invisible bullying, right? Where people are bullying you without bullying you, but making you feel that you're not there in the context of, I mean, I don't want to go too much about it, but so I learned so much from that situation, how to empower and bring people into the conversation. So, and every time I'm in a position of, I guess, direction, influence, whatever you want to call it, leadership, I always try to paint the picture that this is what we're trying to do. Guys, do you think that this is the right thing or the bad thing, or have you got any other input, right? I think Riraj touched on it. It's like, what's the why? What's the vision? And because if you paint what the vision is, people will generally be more accustomed to come with you on that journey. But if you tell people what to do and don't tell them why you're doing it, that's really kind of, I mean, it depends on the situation, but it can be a dangerous style to adopt as well. And it's like that saying, I can't remember, that people always say, right? I can't remember which one of the guys put it up there. People don't leave companies, people live people, right? And people tend to leave people who are poor managers or poor leaders, right? But it's interesting.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is a leader's influence empowers people to take action. So if you look at, say, examples in history, say the civil rights movement, like for Martin Luther King to have as many people turn up at a rally where there was no social media, no buzz, no quick message. That's an example of how an influence can spread to inspire others to take up a cause. Now we look at that as a broad example, but what does that look like in a family? What is the purpose of, what is the cause for a family to take ownership of their health or their finances, or in a small organization to grow? Like, what is almost the figurehead, the leader, how are they inspiring and empowering people to take action themselves versus doing the work for them? Because yes, there's a certain lead by example, but if that's an example you're setting for certain people, and they may not buy that anyway. So it's finding that sweet spot between what is the goal, but how do we maximize the efforts to achieving that goal, versus here's what you need to do, here's what you need to do, now go and do it while I sit at my desk and you do all the work.
And I think, it definitely is that balance. And I think I'd love to hear some comments from people, but I my personal opinion, I'm not sure if you guys agree, but I actually think that everyone has the ability and capability, and is a leader at some point in their life. They just may not choose to acknowledge the associated word, title, responsibility of leadership with what they're doing. But everyone's in a place of leadership, right? In a role of leadership at one point, whether, like I mentioned before, whether you're a parent, whether you're an older brother, older sister, mentor, coach, entrepreneur, teacher, it's just weird how sometimes we're conditioned that the word leadership has to be CEO title or president title or director title, but it's not.
Or authority.
Yeah, like a place of authority, but it's not always that cut and dry, right? It's just a fascinating subject. It's just a fascinating subject. I think what was really interesting, we all asked each of us what our definition of leadership was, right? Or one of the guys asked in terms of what it was, and I think I would love to know what the viewers' definition of leadership is, but I think for me, it was something along the lines of what was it? What did I say now? I think, so it was that leadership is born from experience with the intention to empower the people around you. Yeah, I think that to me sums it up quite nicely. In its most simplest, rawest form, I think, for me. Because you know, when I first started working and I was a tech for 7 years, and someone said, "Oh, do you want to take this management position?" I'm like, "No, that's that's the dark side. That's management. I don't want to go down there. I'm a tech. I will stay tech, right?" But then you make the transition of responsibility, and then you've got people around you, and then you know you've got people understanding you or listening to you, not because you know it all or anything. It's just a moral responsibility, right? And you think, wow, okay, so this is quite impactful. And I've got a duty now to perform. And that itself, back to Saga's point, comes with a lot of responsibility. Like, you might be a leader, you might not want to be a leader, because that's a lot of responsibility, right? And depending on how many people are around you, and whether it's organizational structure, in terms of you've got 100, 200 people underneath you, whatever it is, that's a lot of responsibility, a lot of emotions, right? It's a lot of emotions.
I think on that point, whether we choose it or not, people see us as leaders in different ways, in different situations. So it's acknowledging that the way you show up has an impact on people. One of the guys shared on the call, for 2 days they weren't feeling themselves, and someone asked them, like, it's not working when it's not yourself, because of how it impacts other people, and they just weren't aware of that. So I think how are we a leader? I think to that question is, every single person is a leader because someone sees you as some kind of an influence.
Yeah, definitely.
And whether you choose it or not, or embrace it or not, or choose to harness it, that you have a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, you have a lot of influence. The way you show up and the way you interact with people has a knock-on effect to them, and the results that they can cause as well. So it's bringing it back to knowing that you are a leader. What can you do in whatever area of life that's important to you, whether it's your family or your health or your career or your finances? Like, what now becomes, how does your awareness now increase that you're a leader, you are a leader, and now what can you do with that?
Here's an interesting question for you guys on a Facebook Live. You can throw the question back at me as well. We don't have to answer it, or the audience can answer it. I'm just fascinated, like, who, and you don't have to name them if you don't want to, but can you think of, at least, in your own minds, can you think of someone who you've seen as a leader, right, male or female, that has had a massive positive impact in your life? I'm sure there's a few, right? It's one of those deep questions you've got to really think about, whether it's I can name a few, but yeah, it'd be interesting to maybe unpack why as opposed to who that is, and some of the kind of traits that person has left, or the way they handled leadership, or whatever it is. Because I think even me asking that question, I didn't even think of mine, and it just came to me. And my first person that comes to mind is Miss Palmer, right? My art teacher, who absolutely captivated my imagination, right? She was the only teacher who managed to unlock this crazy wild child, and get me to focus on something that I love doing. And I fell in love with art, and that was the only thing I was ever good at in school, right? Is art and business, entrepreneurship and business and art. So it's amazing that was like, God knows how many, 20, 30, I'm well, 46 now, but I don't know how many, I don't want to do the maths live on Facebook, but when I was in high school. But that conversation and the way she tried to capture my imagination, not tell me what to do, but saying, imagine the possibilities of if you did it this way or that way, without the attached outcome, kind of it just stayed with me, right? I'm sure we've got all these favorite teachers or you know, and people along the journey, and in terms of great managers and then great leaders, and it could be whoever they are, right, that we all follow, look up to. So it's just fascinating. I'd love to know what some of the ways that people have imprinted there.
Well, one example that came to me was a manager that I used to work with, and they were very firm, very, very assertive. But when I was interacting with them, They said, look, here's the vision that they have of like the business and where we want it to get to. And they said, look, here's what I would like from you, but what is it that you can do? So they put the ball back in my court in terms of like, what is your way of taking care of this? Because as part of the management team we're in. And I was like, I can do this, 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 and this. Like, cool, go ahead and do that. And let me know if you need anything from me. And what I see from that is it wasn't my way or the highway. It's like, here's what I need as sort of the head honcho. Here's what I'd like from you. What is it that you can do? And I was like, I can pretty much do most of this. So brilliant. And let me know if you need anything. So it was like, I felt empowered and I felt supported and I felt part of something.
Brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. And that always usually does work, right? It's bringing people along the journey with you. And see, it's fascinating. It's like the two biggest flaws of any business, right, ever, and I've always maintained this same statement because I've experienced it so many times, is and this goes with any business, right? I don't care what shape, size, or how big you are, is not recognizing the people that are in your business, and then not unleashing the potential that those people are within your business. Because if you think about attrition rates and the cost of recruitment and everything and why people leave, it's because they pay so much attention to CVs and scrutiny in the hiring process, and analyze all of your grades and your experience. But then when you become part of the organization, fail to actually recognize your actual talent, right? And if you ask any organization in any business, I challenge anyone, is what is one thing that everyone in your organization is really good at? Or what's their gift? I bet most people don't even know that. Because, and then people in power of influence above them worry that why people are leaving their business is because you haven't taken the time to respect the people in your organization to actually have a proper one-to-one and sit down and say, what is it that you're actually good at? What is it that you want to, what you like doing? And then can we somehow align that with what the business goal is? I mean, that's another conversation, but I remember that was never done with me, right? So I made sure that when I was in any corporate role, that I always did that. But yeah, it's just fascinating. It's just a fascinating topic. Silence.
All right, Saga's got this odd grin on his face. I'm wondering.
I know. I feel like Saga's got something to share, but he's contemplating: should I share it? Should I not share it? Is that kind of look? I don't know.
I was just gonna share, in terms of what I mentioned earlier, with the management that I was in when I had a job when I was young, and I put this. I mentioned this in on Zoom chat, was where my manager at that time, he was a lovely person outside of work. And when he was at work, no one in terms of staffing liked him at all. And I always used to think, that I know we had a different relationship, but I was like, why can't he still, I always saw him as a leader, whether it was in or out of work, because he still led me to where I am now, and helped me grow. And he might have had ways of saying it, but I still understood what he was saying. But he was still that person where I got on with. However, I saw him in a completely different context when he was at work. And yeah, okay, you want to show your authority. I understand that, but there's a way of showing it. And I always used to think that, why is it that he was very arrogant when he came into work? Because all of a sudden, this whole nice side of him completely disappeared, because his mindset was, I'm the leader. But what really, what actually the bigger impact, yes, he was a leader, but the bigger impact is no one saw him as a leader. That's the difference. He thought he was a leader. No one saw him as a leader, because actually everyone hated him, right? So whereas if he had been the same way that he was with me, he could have still been that leader. People would have followed his leadership instead of talking behind his back. But as I said, yeah, it's that balance, right? Of show your authority, but then take a step back, because you don't have to change as a person. And as you said, Manoj, is what people always think, yeah, leader is CEO, managing director, high class manager or whatever. But actually, leaders in everyone, and it doesn't mean that you need to change the way you are and the way you react and act amongst other people. Because if you can be a leader and be yourself, how lovely is that? And if that's your trait, if that's your characteristic where you are arrogant, then so be it, right? But then people will know that you're arrogant because you're going to be the same outside of work.
I think it's interesting. People, it always seems to be the case, right? In some, not all, but some cases where sometimes the higher you are up the food chain, the challenge of the ego creeping in, right, it is a balancing act as well, right? And then what was really interesting is what you shared, Sagar, is that leadership is less about what you think who you are and more about what others see you as, right? And they can only see you in a certain light based on the way you interact with them, right? So it's like that question I shared, right, in the private chat, where one of the CEOs asked me, this was literally live in an interview, right? And I love interviews, right? Because for me, an interview is just a conversation like we're having now, right? I may sound pretty weird, but I love interviews. So he asked me, what makes you a good leader? I'm like, you're asking the right question to the wrong person. And he's scratching his head thinking, I'm interviewing this guy. Why is he saying he's the wrong person? And the point of that was really simple, is that ask that question to the team that is underneath that leader and you'll get the real response. Ask that question to the leader and you're going to get a very biased response because it's through my lens, right? It's because when you're leading, you're doing so many things. You might think you're a good leader, but how do you know? And you only know by asking the people around you, right? It's just, that's the truth. That's the truth. But yeah, it's not easy. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Anybody out there who's in any role of leadership. But I think, like you said, Sagar, is as long as you have integrity and you're leading with intention and good intention. And I think what Viraj said is about empowering people and unleashing that creativity. And the example that Viraj gave, it's like if you share this is what the mission is and the vision and the why, and how can you contribute towards that? Because some of the best ideas, right, that I've ever had are not my own. That they're from people who have just been in the same team as me. And it's just, I think leadership, you can't be narrow-minded, you can't be egotistical, otherwise you get found out, right?
Well, it's one of these questions that I always get people to ask now, and in the interview side of things. And the question is that, when after you interview, they ask, have you got any questions? Normally the questions are, I don't know, like, when do you want me to start, or do I match characteristics, and whatever it is. But one of the best questions I love, and someone actually gave it to me, was, now that you know me and that you've seen me and you see what I'm capable of doing in front of you, I've only got one question. What are your expectations of me? Because before I leave this interview, I don't want to feel like I've left anything out. And it completely throws them off because they haven't actually thought about it themselves, right? Mm. And so it's you're right. It's how you switch it. But yeah, the interview side of things, you're right. We don't know what people expect of us, and then sometimes we just change. We just talk about anything and everything, right? So it's just random.
Yeah, I think see, what I've always been told about mainly, I guess, people in senior HR positions. So I've got some really close friends who are in senior HR positions, so don't take this in a negative way. But and also senior leaders. Manoj, why do you have a one-to-one every single day? Why do you have team meetings every single day? It's like, to me, that's not rocket science. That's functional and foundational and actually required, right? And the reason I have that is it's my check-in with them, and they're check-in with me. And it's not always talking shop, right? Sometimes we have a laugh, we have a mess around, but it's having that placeholder of conversation is almost like my mirror, if that makes sense. Like, am I on the right trajectory? Am I not? Do I assume I'm on the right trajectory, or or is my team telling me that? So I think, I think you have to. I think you have to listen, right? I think we haven't talked about listening, but great trait of leadership is being able to listen.
It's being able to listen, gauge the pulse. And
definitely, listen and gauge the pulse. I like that. Yeah, definitely. Right. I think we should wrap up, guys. I think my belly is rumbling. Sorry, guys. Lunch is calling me. I had a decent-ish breakfast, but that's my excuse. Very just I'm
it is lunchtime, but no, it's
no, but it's been a great topic. Like, we literally went straight from the Zoom into this, so we've not had a chance to catch a breather ourselves as well. But it's a great topic, and looking forward to what our next one's going to be in 2 weeks' time, which is going to be unpacking depression. So it's not
big subject. Big subject. Just quickly on that. The reason that topic came about is, I can't mention the guy's name, but he sent me a very long personal message saying, Manoj, this is my experience. These are all the tablets I'm on. Some I recognize, some I never even heard of. If this helps in any small way, if you should do a topic on this, then can you please do this? So that's the reason why we're doing that topic. And obviously, so thank you. You know who you are. Thank you for sharing that with me on private message. But yeah, our topics are diverse. Sometimes they're lighthearted. Sometimes they're quite sort of sensitive, if you like. But the reason is we always keep it raw. So I think if there is a topic that you want us to talk about, drop it in the chat, DM us, etc. Let us know. And quite a lot of the topics we get actually are from females, ironically, who can't obviously be on the Zoom because the Zoom is for men. But that's why we have our sister groups, right? So we've got Reroute. So big shout out to Reroute, and we've got Mental Wealth. So if you're a female and you want to actually understand more about the growth mindset and mental wealth and mental well-being, check out both those groups. If you're a guy, obviously you're in the right place because you're already viewing us. And if you're viewing us on replay, #replay, put that in there and ask your questions. And we promise to read every single comment, and we'll try and respond to every single comment. And we respect everyone. And the guys who always turn up, massive shout out, because we always have a lot of fun. And we're one big family, I think it's safe to say now. So yeah, it was good to see some old faces that haven't been there for a while. So have a super blessed weekend. We're going to get some food, fill our bellies, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Boys, later. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.